Hello children, the title of today's story is The Old Clock Shop. Christmas Eve had arrived. As last minute shoppers were going home, a thick white sheet of snow lay over Salt Lake City, USA. Yet the lights were still burning in the old clock shop as Ray, its old deaf owner, worked on a clock he had sold that day. So it was the day before Christmas and many of the shops were closed, but only the old clock shop owned by Ray, who was deaf, was still open. He was just doing some last minute repair work. Having finished his work, Ray stood up and was on his way to the back room when a cold rush of air from the front door hit the back of his neck. Okay, just when he wanted to go and pack everything and close the door, he felt some cold rush of air. He felt as though some air was coming into the shop. He turned to meet a last-minute shopper, but his old wise eyes told him that this was not a shopper. He saw two men, one in his 20s, the other closer to 50. The younger man remained at the door. The older man approached the counter with no sign of friendliness in his eyes. Ray was able to hide his growing fear as he slowly pushed a notepad and a pencil across the counter. Okay, two people had come to the shop. One was a man who was around 50 years of age, another young man around 20. He stood near the door and the man who was 50 years old came inside, and since Ray could not talk, he handed him a notepad, a small notebook, wherein he could write what he wanted to ask. He smiled at the unfriendly face, then pointed to his ears and shook his head from side to side. A quick look of surprise changed the man's face as he studied the notepad, then turned and said something to his friend. Okay, the man who had come to buy or to sell something immediately saw the notepad and he understood that Ray could not talk, and he turned back and told that other person, okay, he just made a few gestures. Ray used the chance to look closely at the man, paying attention to the shape of a gun and a restless hand in the man's right coat pocket. Anger boiled within him, but it was kept down by an inner voice that said, "Be still." Ray was not very happy on looking at that man. He was a little angry with him because he didn't smile and he seemed very unfriendly. But then he just told himself that he shouldn't lose his temper and he should be calm. He wrote on the notepad, "May I help you?" For the first time, the older man looked directly at Ray and smiled. So when Ray was calm and he offered him help, the other person he became a little calm and he was smiling at him. He was turning to be friendly. A cruel, mocking smile. They both understood why he was there, why his friend remained at the door. They looked like men who were down on their luck and were now ready to try something they would later be sorry about. Okay, now Ray understood that they had no choice, but they had to come to the clock shop because they needed some help from Ray. The clocks ticked on. Ray calmly wrote another message. "Have you come to pick up a clock or watch?" Then he pointed to the loan board filled with hanging clocks and pocket watches. Okay, he had a loan board wherein he would give the clocks for some days to be borrowed as a loan, and then it had to be returned. He was not a pawnbroker, but at the same time couldn't say no to the needy people who placed their old watches or clocks before him for anything they could get. He loaned more than he should. They would be there when the owners want them back at the same price he had paid with no interest. See, Ray was a very kind man. He would help everyone who came to his shop with an old watch. He would just take the watch, give them how much of money they wanted, and then he would not trouble them asking to take their watch and give the money back. He would just keep quiet and wait for them to come and return the money. Then the older man seemed to feel a little easier, took out his hand from his pocket and quickly looked at the watch on his wrist. "How much will you give me for this?" the man wrote. Ray noticed a little shame in the grey eyes looking at him. The watch was nothing special and yet had great powers. It was something to exchange, a way out of a bad situation. Okay, Ray was an experienced man. He had a clock shop, so he knew what the value of each clock or watch was. So he knew that this watch was not, it was not an expensive watch or something. It was just an ordinary watch. But then he understood that the old man was helpless. He needed money badly. So we can say that the watch had power to help the man. Knowing that great need had brought the man to his shop in the first place, Ray asked, "How much do you need for it?" The reply came back on the notepad, "Whatever it's worth." Ray reached out into his cash box, pulled out a $50 note and passed it into the man's hand. As they shook hands, Ray looked into the man's eyes. They seemed to say, "Thank you." Okay, so he wanted to know how much will he get. Okay, Ray asked that man, "How much do you want for this watch?" Then that man said, "How much ever it's worth it, whatever its worth is." Then Ray immediately gave him a $50 note. And the man was very happy, okay? He was very thankful that Ray had given him a $50 note. Before turning to leave, the man wrote, "I will be back to pick it up as soon as I can. Merry Christmas." Okay, both of them knew that the watch was not worth $50. But Ray wanted to help that man. And the man seemed very helpless. So he just accepted that money which Ray had given him. And he promised that he would come back after Christmas and then pay him the money and take the watch back. And he wished him Merry Christmas and he went away. The little story ended on the half an hour, the clock striking all together. The timepieces, which had been looking on silently all the while, rang out the time and such feeling that even Ray thought he could hear them. Their sweet musical message was filled with hope. The timeless message of peace on earth, goodwill towards all, was felt by the three men who stood in the old clock shop. Okay, so finally that man took the money. He was just leaving, and then Ray felt that he had done a very good deed. He was very happy with himself, and the message of Christmas is what? Peace on earth. That means there should be peace on all, everywhere, and goodwill towards all. That means we should do good deeds and be good to everyone. Thank you.